Happy Monday. Monday. We're early today. I'm late, but I'm early. It's the ultimate paradox, really. I had a call for work. I have more calls for work later. These are the things that drive Kincaid nuts on Thursdays when I'm like in and out. But I couldn't do noon today, so I said, we'll do 11:10. I put it out through the Crossing Broad account, 11:10. That's going to be the time that we go live. And then what happened? I was still on that call, so I set it to 11:15, and now we're starting at like 11:17. So if you're live, if you're watching on YouTube or X or Facebook, I appreciate you tremendously. And if you're listening after the fact in the podcast feed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, wherever you get your podcasts, I appreciate you just as much, if not more, for taking the time out of your day to listen to whenever you listen to this. And I will say right off the bat, because I kind of buried it last week on last Monday, but every Tuesday and Friday, you can now also hang out with me in the morning, 8 a.m. sharp. And I was only late by like 2 minutes last Friday, but the first show I was definitely on time for. Tuesdays and Fridays, 8 a.m., The Russ Joy Show. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts and also on YouTube at The Russ Joy Show. We have a lot that we're going to get into tomorrow. I'm going to go a little bit more in depth on some of the stuff we're going to talk about today. So by all means, tomorrow, join me live. That's also available wherever you get your podcasts. You can't miss it. There, thankfully, are no other shows called The Russ Joy Show. So I didn't have to compete. Like when I created the Joy Media account, and I have like some guy in like Vietnam or the Philippines or something has like 500,000 followers. Craig's pulled it up before. I didn't know that when I named Joy Media LLC. I didn't think it was going to be like a big thing that I was going to have to compete with. But yes, there's like a guy with a beard, and one of their popular videos has like 2 million views. I wish I had 2 million views on one of the videos over on the Joy Media account. Alas, I don't. I digress. We have a lot to get into today, and we've got like 30-odd minutes, 40-ish minutes to get into it all. And so I appreciate everybody who joined over in the comments section, and I'll pull up your questions, comments, and concerns along the way. We're going to get into a bunch, and Craig is going to try to hold me to it because sometimes I preview things and then I forget because I don't do a full show rundown. What am I, a professional? Absolutely not. Things that we're going to get into today. I do want to lead off with a little bit of positivity with Paul George. There was a really cool video that was going around about Tyrese Maxey, which we can't show you in its entirety. It's 6 minutes, but I do want to talk about that. We'll briefly touch on the Flyers because I think last Friday on this show with Kincaid, we sort of touched on it. And on the Russ Joy Show, we touched on it a little bit. But the Flyers rushed to re-sign some of their free agents. Then over the weekend, we had a Snow The Goalie, and there was an interaction that kind of blew up a little bit and then got me in a little bit of hot water with one of my co-hosts. We'll talk about that for a little bit. The Phillies lost 2 out of 3, including the second and third game of their series against the Braves. And now they have to face the Dodgers. Not ideal, but we'll talk about that as well. And for the first time that I can remember in a very long time, we're going to talk about the Philadelphia Union on this show. And not about what's happening on the field, because that doesn't matter. They're a shit show. Nay, it's more about what has happened around the Philadelphia Union and with their supporters section, which I have a very checkered past with. And we will try to get to that. And if there's one thing that maybe is going to get pushed to tomorrow's show over on the Russ Joy Show channel, it might be that one. But there's something that has to be called out. There's like some weird hypocrisy and just some gutlessness that has to get called out. And that's what we're going to do today on Crossing Broadcast. So again, thank you to everybody who's joining. Got a what up from Nico. Ford was complaining, but now Ford also notes that he's here. Thank goodness. Thank you, Ford. Ford has thoughts on the Sixers, which we'll get to in a little bit. I'm very excited for today. I think today is going to be swell. We've got Kyle already checking out, Sugarman out. Reed to Ford once Berhalter fired. It looks like there's a chance of that happening, but I think it's not just going to be him. I think they're ultimately going to maybe have to fire Matt Crocker. Well, we're probably not going to talk about that on this show today. Just giving you a heads up if you're a big U.S. men's national team fan. The bad news is we're probably not going to talk about them very much today. We will talk about it on this show or the Russ Joy Show later this week if they ultimately decide that it's time to fire an incompetent coach who's very well overmatched. So anyway, let's get to some of the positivity from the start. And Craig, I think you had a couple of the tweets pulled up, but I want to start off with some newly released clips from Paul George's show. He's got a podcast where he revealed that he's going to wear the number 8, the reasons that he's wearing the number 8. He talked about his negotiations with the Clippers. He talked about what made him want to sign with the Philadelphia 76ers. I'll go a little bit of macro view here while Craig gets one or two of those ready to pull up on the screen, because I'm not really concerned with a takedown here because we are crediting them appropriately. But Paul George on his show and on these clips, which you'll hear, see, whatever, He wanted to stay with the Clippers initially. That was a thing that I initially raised as a concern, is that he always said that he wanted to play in LA. Why did he leave LA? It sounds like there were some real breakdowns with their front office, with what they perceived his value to be and what he perceived his value to be. So that wasn't ideal. Craig, actually, let's play that clip, because there's a lot in there about Kawhi Leonard, about what the Clippers were willing to pay, and ultimately how he thinks they viewed him and his value.
What was the negotiations like with the Clippers to let you know that, hey, I'm leaving y'all and I'm going to Philly?
Just to put it out there, like, I never wanted to leave LA. LA is home. This is where I wanted to finish at. I wanted to work as hard as possible to win one in LA. Like, that was the goal, to be here and be committed to LA. As it played out, though, like, the first initial deal was, I thought, kind of disrespectful, right?
Define disrespect.
And again, in all of this, no hard feelings. So the first initial deal was like 2 years, 60. So I'm like, whoa.
Hey, that's crazy, bro.
That's crazy.
That's
crazy.
crazy.
That's crazy.
So I'm like,
Wow.
no, I'm not signing that. This was maybe like October-ish. Negotiations first started, and it was 260. And as we kept going, it was like, they would go up, inches, to where it was like 44, 45, right? But this was like a couple months in between before we got it to 40-something. I'm still like, nah, I'm not doing that. Then I hear wind of like, what they're going to give Kawhi. So I'm like, just give me what Kawhi got. Like,
Right.
y'all view us the same. Like, we came here together. We want to finish this together. I'll take what Kawhi got. Like, no
cool
problem. I was cool with that. Like,
wow.
And we were still taking less. We were taking less.
Wow.
Kawhi took less. I was like, if Kawhi gonna take less, I'm not gonna say I want more than Kawhi. Like, I'm not gonna, like, it's not about me being paid more than him. Like, I'm gonna take what he got. Y'all give him that, give me that. They didn't want to do that. So this was before the All-Star break. So I'm like, you know what? I don't want, like, let's not even have no more conversations. Like, let's just play this year out. Cause it was starting to get into like my mood. Now I'm, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't want to have that energy carry over into the team. Season in, I finished healthy, 74 games played, and had one of my most efficient seasons. So now we go into negotiations. Now they bring it to 3 years.
Where we at?
150. All right. That's cool. It sucks that it had to get to this point, like, that we couldn't get this figured out a lot sooner. But now we at the end of the year, 3 years, 150. So I'm like, all right, like, now we're in a ballpark. You know what I mean? Now we can have conversation here. I
think this is where, by the way, while
trade.
it's playing.
Because in the meeting, they're like,
think you can end it there, Craig, because it's fine. I believe that is the point in time, if I'm kind of lining up the timelines correctly. I think that's about where we saw that report. This is when I was on vacation, that the Sixers' interest or their belief that they could sign him had waned. I think that's where it lines up, somewhere around there, that there was probably a conversation between Paul George and the Clippers about that $30 million per year. And it's interesting. He didn't want to do the 2-year, $60 million contract. And I see Ford here, saying about when you live in the real world, hearing numbers like this, like, it was disrespectful to get 2 years, $60 million. Yes. I hear it and I agree and all that. I look at it like this. If you've worked your entire life to reach the pinnacle of something and it's teams that are valued at billions of dollars, you are totally within your right as a player to want as much money as you can. And while I would absolutely love to make $1 million, to make $2 million, to make $15 million, I shan't. It likely will not happen for me unless all of a sudden people really love the content that I create. Or I start an OnlyFans for pictures of my feet, which are not very attractive feet. So I'm kind of screwed. I don't think there's much of a future in that for me. So while it sucks to maybe have to hear that, this is part of a negotiation. So Paul George goes through this whole thing. And he referenced a few times, give me what Kawhi got. Kawhi Leonard signed a 3-year, $153 million contract with the Clippers, which, for those of you who may not be the most math astute, that's $51 million a year. So with that in mind, you can likely understand why a guy who was brought in at the same time, who, by the way, they traded a lot of draft capital for, the fact that and that was also part of the SGA trade, I believe, right? He was the centerpiece. Anyway, they traded a ton of assets to get Paul George. And the entire time it was set up as Paul George and Kawhi Leonard together. Well, it's understandable that Paul George would say, yo, if he's worth $51 million a year, granted he was a multiple-time finals MVP, NBA champion, defensive player of the year, fine, he needs to get more, that's okay. But the disparity shouldn't be $51 million to $30 million. Like, if you look at it from the vantage point of whatever your job is, say you're making $50,000 a year, or let's say you're making $30,000, and you find out that, like, hey, this other guy or lady or whoever was brought in at the same time. We do essentially the same job. Our responsibilities are more or less the same. I make $31,000, this guy makes $50, or I make $30, this guy makes $51. You're not going to be thrilled. All right, so like put it, and I hope everybody who is out there is getting the most they can, the most bang for their buck, all that. But you wouldn't be happy if comparatively you were getting 30,000 versus 51. Okay. So we're talking about generational wealth. We're talking about safety, security, all that for these athletes, right? Like they have family members who come out of the woodwork. They have friends who supported them the entire time. They're probably paying off mortgages, doing all that stuff. Are they spending this on like lavish stuff like stupid watches and rings and cars? Yes, they are. And some of these guys will spend themselves into the poorhouse, and it's a shame. And then you do the whole breakdown about the poor mechanisms put in place for these guys to, actually build their wealth and all that. All this is to say, I get why he initially was upset with that, but it did sound like towards the end they started coming around. Now, the part of the clip that we left out is that eventually it got to a point with the Clippers where he thought they were close, and he said, all right, they came back and they said, I believe it was about the Kawhi money. It was close. And he said, all right, if you're not going to give me, he was like, I want that, but I want a no-trade clause. A no-trade clause has to be part of whatever the deal is, because he was going to take less. And as he said there, Kawhi took less than market value. Paul George thought that whatever, I forget what the exact figure was. We could play it. It doesn't really matter. But he thought that based on what he was getting, fine, I want to play here, though. I don't want you to trade me away. Give me a no-trade clause. And they said no. And then he said, all right, well, if you're not going to do that, then give me the 4 years at 50-ish million. So like around $200 million for 4 years. Because at least if you're, there you go. Like 4 years, $220 million. If you're not going to give me the no trade clause, at least let me get that last year at that $50+ million value, so that if you decide in a year you want to trade me away to like Sacramento, or trade me back to Oklahoma City, or trade me to Charlotte, which love North Carolina, but you don't want to play for the Hornets. At least I have that extra $50 million in the bank, or coming to me guaranteed. And they said no. So that's where the breakdown happened. And then eventually he goes and the Sixers contingent shows up to his house. And given the time here, Craig, I don't think we're going to play it, but it is available on X and everything. He has this meeting where most of the Sixers brass shows up. Dr. J is with them. They sit down, they're meeting the family, they're doing the whole thing. And Paul George said, they outlined what it was about playing for the Sixers that really got the job done. And it was, one, playing alongside Joel Embiid, who he, says is arguably the best big in the league, and also playing with one of the best young point guards in the league, in Tyrese Maxey. Why should that matter to you if you're a Sixers fan? Because it speaks to the fact that this guy's coming to town and is going to accept a role. At least that's what it sounds like. It sounds like he's not saying on his own show, where he has the full creative freedom to do it if he wants. He's not saying, I'm coming there to be the man. He didn't just say, I'm going there to play with Joel Embiid, kind of cast Tyrese Maxey aside, where it's essentially, I'm going there to be the number two, to be the Robin to Batman. I'm not saying that he's necessarily saying he's going to say that he is the third option, but he does mention of the very few players that were under contract for the Sixers that he wanted to go play with Embiid and go play with Maxey, and that he thinks Maxey's a really promising guard, like one of the best young point guards in the game. That should give you at least a little bit of confidence. That should at least make you feel a little bit better about the potential chemistry of those guys working together, that they understand a role. How many times on this show did we talk about the fact that, like, especially with the Knicks, they all knew what their roles were. The role players knew exactly what was expected of them. The stars knew what was expected of them. If this all works the way that it should, and Paul George is able to play 74 games like he did last year, I'm not going to say that they're the second best team in the East or that they'll finish with the second best record. I think that talent-wise, especially with a few more of the signings they made over the weekend, which, Caleb Martin, hello. They, talent-wise, might be the second best team in the East. However, we know how injuries work. We know what the roller coaster is like with Joel Embiid. We know that historically what some of the roller coaster has been with, health-wise, with Paul George. I think they're the second most talented team in the East. I would still expect them to finish 4th or 5th with all that kind of built in. I would take this team as it's currently constructed and probably adding another guard or so. I would rather have that and have the upside of that big three over what Milwaukee has with an aging Dame Lillard, with Giannis and a bunch of misfit toys. And yes, I know that Kyle Scott is probably going to roll over in his lavish estate down the shore when I say this, but I would take this over what the Knicks have. I think the Knicks traded way too much to get Mikal Bridges in. I think Mikal Bridges is a very good player. I think that they're going to be a very good team, and they're going to be a depth team. I still think that that team is ultimately going to be massively reliant on Jalen Brunson. I think that once Julius Randle comes in, they're going to have to defer to him. I don't think it's going to work as perfectly as they think it's going to in New York. And there's no other team, by the way, in the East that gives me any pause. I mean, the Celtics go without saying. They're the best team. They're the reigning NBA champions. They're number one. I think talent-wise, the Sixers are number 2. So the Paul George thing is cool. The other cool thing that you should come across, if you have not done so already, is go over to the Sixers Twitter and look at the way they rolled out the red carpet for Tyrese Maxey. Maxey could have been given a massive deal last offseason. This team convinced him a year ago, wait a year. We want to go essentially big star hunting in 2024. If you hold out, we promise it'll be worth your while. I've been very critical of Daryl Morey and his ability to build a team. As of right now, from what I'm seeing and the way that the timing has worked out, I think he's done a very good job. I can't shit on the effort that Morey has put into this offseason. I think they still need at least 1 or 2 more shooters. I saw people were throwing around the name Davis Bertans to be like a backup 4. Wouldn't hate that on a buyout. I think that, if nothing else, Morey has set this team up to get guys who are going to ring chase from the start. And once the buyouts happen again around the trade deadline, this is going to be a very attractive place to play. And it's going to be an attractive place for all those times that you've lost out on some guys that you thought maybe would want to try to ring chase with the MVP or on his ascent to the MVP. I think that this is maybe the year that you can get those guys. So I have to be honest. That's where I'm at. Tyrese Maxey gets this absolute incredible, almost like walk down memory lane. It was kind of like, this is your life. Dr. J's there, walks him through the facility. They've got like all his AAU medals and plaques and all that kind of stuff. And, recorded testimonials from Dawn Staley. There were some from his family, Joel Embiid. They had the whole, like, it was great. I know that it is in this goofy role as whatever media is, you're supposed to remain objective. I get it, whatever. I like the Sixers more than I like any of the other teams. I have that connection through my baba, through my grandma. So like, this is the team that I feel a little bit more of an emotional connection to. Tyrese Maxey is my favorite athlete in the city because there is a positivity that flows through him. There is a positivity that he exudes that makes even the most mundane Sixers performance still enjoyable. I can't think of an athlete who I think has had, across the board, a higher positivity rating among a fan base. And the fact that he waited a year to sign this max deal, and the fact that he was willing to bet on himself, which in fairness, it worked out. Most improved player, like, he established himself that, like, yes, he is a max level kind of guy. And if he continues to develop, my God, imagine what this could look like in 2 years. They rolled out the red carpet for him. They put together a presentation I have never seen a pro athlete get. I have never seen an athlete an NBA player, especially a young NBA player, get that kind of a rollout. Again, I can't do it justice. Go find the video on their X account. I'm thrilled that he's here long term. I'm thrilled that he got his money. Eric Schmidt says over on YouTube, he's the most likable guy in the city that he can ever remember. I genuinely do not know a person who is a Sixers fan who doesn't like Tyrese Maxey. There were people going into last year who said, I don't know, like, is he good enough? Is he going to be ready if James Harden leaves, which that obviously happened? Is he going to be ready? And he stepped up in every way. Incredibly positive guy. You have to, I don't know who couldn't like him. I get that other teams, fan bases don't like him. I get that they don't like that he smiles when he's, beating you, but he also smiles all the time. Very positive guy. We like him. We like him here. At Crossing Broadcast, I will plant the flag. We like Tyrese Maxey. All right, so that's done. Sixers, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being part of the show. We need to move on to other things. What do we have left, Craig? We have Flyers, we have Union, and Phillies. I'm going to touch on this really quickly with the Phillies, and I'm going to go full disclosure because you know how I am. I'm not going to do the thing that some people in sports media do where they fake that they watch the games. I didn't watch the Phillies this weekend. Not a minute. I did not watch either game. At some point, will go back and watch them before tomorrow's Russ Joy Show. I did not watch them. I'm not going to pontificate. What I will say is disappointing to lose 2 of 3. Disappointing to lose the second and third games. Positive is that you won the NOLA start. And that was the one thing I was concerned about was would NOLA implode and set a very bad example and kind of set a bad tone for the weekend. He didn't. They got through that first game. Last 2 days, it's not great. They've been able to this point, play decent enough baseball to maintain a solid 8-game advantage in the NL East. And I think it's great. And I think in the grand scheme of things, we've talked about this a few times, if they're able to just weather the storm, play close to 500 baseball until Schwarber's back, till Harper's back, you're fine. You'll take that. You should. I don't see the Braves going on some unbelievable tear between now and the deadline where they're going to get this thing to a 2 or 3 game lead. I think that while it sucks to lose 2 of 3, it could have been horrific to have gotten swept. It's fine. I don't like losing 2 of 3, but it's okay. We're not sounding all the alarms here. We're not talking about doomsday. Now, obviously, it will matter. They're about to play the Dodgers. The Dodgers thing is a little bit trickier. The Dodgers series really only matters more from the perspective of trying to get home field throughout the postseason, which this team was in position to do, could still be in position to do if they're able to weather the storm while they wait for some of their stars to get back. It's a big series, but it's not a massive one. If you lose 2 or 3 to the Dodgers, it sucks for home field. It sucks for potential tiebreakers down the line. It doesn't massively hurt where you're at in the standings. It doesn't massively hurt you the way that getting swept by the Braves would have. I don't want to see them get swept. It would be a disaster to get swept by the Dodgers. If you lose 2 out of 3, you'll bounce back. Sean C. says, when the Phillies are a good team, it's insufferable how the Twitter fans act like the July 5th game is week 11 of the NFL season. I know people say that there are too many games, and there are. 162 games is way too many for baseball. There's no debating that. If you're a huge baseball fan and you can't get enough of 162 and you want 170, you're out of your mind. You need a hobby. You need to touch grass. You need a spouse or a loved one or kids or a pet. You need something. You should not be like 170 games in the regular season, which I've heard bantered about before. Like maybe you shorten spring training to 170 games. No, absolutely not. If they shorten the season to 100, which they never would, it would be a better league. It would be baseball would be better with 100 games instead of 162. They're never going to do it because the records that currently stand could never be broken. You'd have to start going on like percentage basis, right? Like home runs per 100 games. You would never have records broken. And what are some of the best ways to make money in baseball? Go after records. Teams that aren't relevant anymore that have a guy who's hitting, who's getting close to his 500th home run or getting close to his 600th home run, like that's going to matter. Those milestones matter. Setting records will matter. They're never going to do it, ever, in baseball. I can't envision a scenario where they ever shorten the season. Ever, ever, ever. JToxic49, I appreciate the rationalism here. It's July. They have Bryce and Schwarber out. No panic at all. I agree. Again, swept by the Dodgers would be bad just from the perspective of home field. It's also bad if the Braves then go on to win 2 of the next 3 and then it's a 6-game lead instead of 8. I went into last weekend. I think I said it on this show. I definitely said it over on the Russ Joy Show, available wherever you get your podcasts. that the Braves series was really important. It wasn't an opportunity to fully put your foot on their throat and to end their season, but it could dramatically impact the way that their front office views the trade deadline and how realistic it is that they could get back into the NL East race. Losing 2 of 3 sucks. I don't think it's fundamentally changed anything for the Braves or their front office. You don't want them to get within 5 games or 4 games. You want to keep that 7, 8, 9 or more game lead over the next few weeks until those guys are back. All right, so we got that. Phillies are done. I feel good about the Phillies. We're fine. We'll talk about them more tomorrow. Do we go Flyers or would you go Union? I know that there are probably some people right now who are about to tune out, and I'm going to tell you right now, if you do, it's a shame because you're going to miss out on some heated thoughts here. I tend to say we should talk about the Flyers and that we could then talk about the Union. And I'm going to dive into both of these more because I am up against it with another meeting that's going to happen in about 15 minutes. So unfortunately for all of us, maybe, this show is going to get cut short today, but you have the Russ Joy Show tomorrow. So, I mean, is it really that bad? I don't know. Let's talk about the Flyers quick. Last week, my concern was the Flyers seemed to rush to re-sign Eric Johnson to be their 7th defenseman, presumably, although it's Torts, so who the hell knows, and to re-sign Garnet Hathaway, who's a wonderful player, a solid enough veteran winger, a guy who can play in a bunch of situations, and is a guy who, from all accounts, was viewed as a very good guy in the locker room. So on the surface, I have no issue with it. You're getting 2 guys that, in theory, you're calling veteran leaders. You're saying, at least in the case of Hathaway, can contribute in a bunch of facets of the game. Eric Johnson can't. He admitted when he was traded here that there's not a lot left and that he's not the same player he once was. My question was, why are you rushing out to re-sign these guys when you have a full offseason ahead of you? You've set the expectation that you're a rebuilding team. There is a certain amount of built-in equity with the fan base that they're not going to... If you had gotten to the last week or 2 weeks left of the offseason and you didn't have your 7th defenseman or you didn't have a bottom 6 winger, and then you went dumpster diving at the end, the fans aren't going to care because they're hearing rebuild, 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 and it's fine. The Flyers went out and decided to re-sign both of these guys. Eric Johnson's not a very good player anymore. If he's a leader, fine. He's your 7th defenseman, fine. Torts will not do that. Torts will try to play him 40-plus games. That, to me, is a concern. Hathaway's fine. The only concern I really have with him is, in the midst of a rebuild, I want to see as many young guys as I can. I do believe that there's an importance to leadership. You have that with Couturier. You have that with Konechny. You haven't traded Lawton yet, who should probably be dealt since this is a rebuild and there have been teams that have offered you picks in the past. Lawton probably should be dealt, and if he's not, there's another one. There you have your leadership core. I don't care about anybody else at that point. You have Rasmus Ristolainen, you have Travis Sanheim. You should have your leaders. You should have guys who are here who can be leaders. You don't need to have your 7th defenseman spot or have one of the bottom 6 wing spots taken up by Hathaway, by Johnson. There's no point. There's no reason to. And the people who get all worked up about it are like, well, you still have to have veterans on the team. You do. You have other vets. I don't give a shit. I want to see as many of the young kids as you can because while some of them aren't going to be ready, some of them aren't going to look good, perhaps you'll call someone up who will go on a 10-game run and you'll say, wow, this guy's actually capable of playing at this level. And then you either say, this is essentially found money, and now we can trade away a Hathaway for something at the deadline to a team that can contend, or you say, all right, well, we don't have the organizational depth. We know we have to address that position. There's a no-lose scenario there. I'm concerned that it feels like they're trying to do the retool again instead of the rebuild. And while they have 3 firsts next year, 3 seconds next year, which are great, 2 of those firsts are very late in the first round. So you can't sit on the fence. You have to go one way or the other, or you're going to be back in hockey purgatory. I brought this up on Snow the Goalie over the weekend. I'm going to talk about it more tomorrow on the Russ Joy Show. There was an exchange that I had with Ant on our show about the vision for the team and about what they're doing and what it looks like they could potentially do, and me cautioning that, I don't want to see them in hockey purgatory picking at 12 next year when, you have a very good draft coming up, and I would like you to be in position that if you're not in the top 3, just because Torts isn't going to coach a team that's somehow going to end up in the bottom 3, and you don't get lottery luck, that you could at least use some of those other assets to move up and go out and maybe get a star player that you can pair with a Matvei Mishkov. If not next year, then 2 years down the line. You need that elite talent. And Ant has a very different way of looking at it. And I know Ant watches the show or listens to the show, so he'll get himself locked and loaded again for the next time we do Snow the Goalie. But we have a very fundamental difference in how we approach what a rebuild is supposed to be. We're going to dive into that on tomorrow's show on the Russ Joy Show. So again, go subscribe and all that. You can go check out the clip over on the Snow The Goalie YouTube and over on X and all that. So I'll leave the Flyers there. We're going to put a pin in them. I do want to get to this thing about the Union, though, because there are so many people commenting about it. The Philadelphia Union, an absolute disgrace, an absolute mess. Kincaid and I touched on this a little bit last week, and then it got worse. Craig, I don't know if you found the video or if you found the images of what happened over the weekend. I have so many problems with what are going on around the Philadelphia Union, not the on-field product. The on-field product is what it is. This team decided that for whatever reason, they were going to run it back after running it back. And 2 years removed from making it to an MLS Cup final and letting Gareth Bale have a wide open header on the back post that took you to actually, like, you had the MLS Cup in your hands, you blew it, fine. They chose to run it back again a year later, not exactly fine. They have now since sold off arguably their best forward in Carranza. He gone. They brought back Kai Wagner, who looked like he was going to leave last offseason, and then there was a certain slur that was used on the field, and perhaps maybe some of those suitors went away, and he came back, and he's still probably the best left back in MLS. But the team is largely unchanged. And then things fell apart. Craig, let's bring it up, because I think Pagan did something over on the site. There was a sign, this one, sell the team. Scroll down, because I want to see if he had the other... If you had the other one, or was it Kincaid? I can't see that far. The screen's way too far away. Play this video, Craig. Play the video down below. There was a sign. We don't need the audio for it if you don't want. It's totally fine. Just play that. The Union confiscated a sign. And the one sign, I think it was this one, said the sugar ain't sweet, sell the team. That, of course, is a reference to Jay Sugarman, the owner of the team. A guy who, for the most part, doesn't make himself available to the media. Only really shows up, there's the sign, only ever really shows up when something has gone significantly well. For the most part, is like a shadow broker. There was the time when they made the Lamar Hunt U.S. Open Cup final that he landed on the field in a helicopter on the practice fields. He is useless. Jay Sugarman, you don't like being called useless, you can reach out to Kevin Kincaid, and you guys can talk. He's never made available. And a couple months ago, and I will welcome this guy to come on to this show or to the Russ Joy Show, I don't care. But he sat down with Jonathan Tannewald over at the Philadelphia Inquirer. And Jonathan Tannewald put together a fluff piece. He put together an interview that didn't get to the heart of a lot of the concerns of the fan base, that didn't hold anything accountable, didn't ask questions really about why is it exactly that you chose and continue to facilitate this idea that running it back is a good idea. And he threw out this idea that Jim Curtin, the coach, and Ernst Tanner, the front office executive, if they come to him with a request for a player, Jay Sugarman's going to make it happen, which is total bullshit. Not true. No chance. This team, since its inception, has needed a legitimate designated player level striker. They have not gotten it. They have been able to go dumpster diving a few times. They've been able to pull guys that you've never heard of before who come over and do perform, which I would say is a large function of having Ernst Tanner, who I still think is one of the best executives in all of MLS and is by far the best at his position in the history of the Philadelphia Union. I don't fault him. I think that they have a cheap ownership. I think they have an owner who has a small market mentality, who's just happy that his ROI is going to be 3x, 4x, 5x, maybe even more. Now, Jillian checks in over on YouTube and says, in Montreal, the fan group chanted at Sugarman, who was nearby, and he walked away. This guy doesn't get called out by like people who actually could have a critical conversation. Jonathan Tannewald at the Inquirer could have had that conversation, didn't do it. And the reason that I'm incensed about it, and then I'll get back to the Sons of Ben and how they piss me off, as somebody who was once a season ticket holder, and as somebody who got into it once with, I don't know, it was a fucking capo or whatever doesn't matter. Bunch of self-indulgent pricks at the time. Maybe they're not anymore. Some of them were. Jonathan Tannewald does this story a few months ago, and Sugarman talks about how it's important that they leave spots on the senior team, on the actual Philadelphia Union team that you pay money to go see, or you pay money to Apple TV to watch on TV. It's a great stadium. Great place to tailgate. I loved the atmosphere going to Philadelphia Union games, okay? I covered them when they won the support show. I genuinely want that team to be something and to matter. But they have taken it from where it was a cup finalist to being running it back and being very close to doing it again to what is essentially like, are they going to even make the playoffs? And if they do, is it just going to be a bottom of the table kind of team? Tannewald has the owner who doesn't talk to the media. Sugarman says, it's better to not go out and get some guys who could block the academy players. And as if that weren't enough, and as if that weren't reason enough to be angry as a reader, if you have ever cared about the team, Tannewald added his own commentary that's actually a pretty sensible way to look at it. Because they've invested in the academy, it's a sensible thing to do to not block potential Union Academy players, which is such small-minded bullshit. It doesn't work in Philadelphia. It shouldn't. If Don Garber, the MLS commissioner, had cojones, he would look at this ownership and say, either sell the team or bring on more owners who are going to contribute money. One of your biggest market teams shouldn't be applying Moneyball tactics. That's not how this is supposed to work. And when you were close, and when you had the cup in your hands 2 years ago, and when you ran it back, you had the chance to make the team better. You had the chance to actually do something. To instead of just being the Phillies bitch in the summer, you had the chance not to compete with the Phillies, not to have the same kind of equity built up, but for people to care. I spent a decade saying the Phillies are not good. This is the time to invest in the Union because people were apathetic about the Phillies, put some money into the team, and then go out and get a star player. At least try. And get some of those people who are apathetic to the Phillies to come to the park, to believe, you build your fan base. I had been told years ago that the actual area that the Union Stadium, the Subaru Park, is built on was actually set that they could extend, that they could expand the seating if the stadium, if the team ever got good enough and they built enough of a fan base. They had it. What the fuck were you people doing? Jay Sugarman, what are you doing? What are you thinking? Because you, for whatever reason, chose not to invest, chose not to bring on more minority owners who could invest. Kevin Durant, as a minority owner of the team, has a minority stake in the team. Because they didn't invest funds into that team, and because they chose to be complacent and to run it back, they have now put themselves in a position where they are not only just losing the chance to get those casual fans, they're not just losing some fans who have been around for the last 2 years watching a very good team. They are losing people who actively have chosen to support that team for over a decade. And that includes people, and I'm gonna have to, put a pin in this. Go subscribe to the other show for tomorrow. They are going to lose people who were supporting Philadelphia soccer before there was a team. The initial people who founded the Sons of Ben, who went down to City Hall, who were actively having like a campaign, MLS, give us a team. We have a large fan base in the greater Philly area. Give us a team. You're losing some of those people. But here's why I have to put a pin in it. Because I don't have enough time on today's show to get into why the Sons of Ben dropped the ball in the biggest way, in one of the worst sellout bullshit corporate messages I think I've ever seen a supporter section of a soccer team put out. And I want that comment, by the way, Craig. I'll pull it up. Sean C. I can't wait for my season ticket opt-out opportunity. Gonna hit my inbox like a drug. There you go. There is a paying season ticket holder who is not only not contemplating, do I do it, do I not? Is saying, I'm looking forward to opting out. Tomorrow on the other show, I'm going to tell you why the Sons of Ben dropped the ball. Not only did they have to put out their statement that nobody could read, they had to put it out 2 or 3 more times. There was sass, whole bunch of bullshit, and they said they didn't want to put their group at risk, I guess with ownership or with their standing with the team. And it is such a lazy cop-out, and it is so disgraceful. But given some of the interactions I've had with some of their leadership over the years, I have to be honest, I'm not exactly surprised. Tomorrow on the Russ Joy Show. We'll talk about that. We'll dive a little bit more into the Flyers. We'll dive into what's happening with the Phillies. Maybe if there's another thing from the playoff, Paul, right? From B-ball, or not B-ball Paul, but from Paul George, PG 8 now, not 13. We'll get into that as well. Any other news that breaks, any other big national sports stories, we'll get into them tomorrow, 8 a.m. So whenever you listen to this, Tuesday, 8 a.m., The Russ Joy Show on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I look forward to talking to all of you tomorrow. A big, big, big thank you to Craig on the other side of the glass for today's fantastic work on the board. I will talk to as many of you as possible tomorrow, 8 a.m. Catch me there. Catch me outside. How about that? And if you're not going to catch me there, you can come back here Thursday, Crossing Broadcast, Kevin Kincaid in the lead chair. I will probably be here. Craig will be here. Perhaps a guest. Who knows? Who's to say? Anyway, got worked up. Now I have to go to a meeting. I'm flush. I'm schwitzing. All right. Talk to all of you very soon. Thanks for tuning in to Crossing Broadcast. We'll talk to all of you very soon.